Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 10 of the anime series 3D Kanojo Real Girl. And this episode finally delivers on everything I wanted. No more mincing words, actual progression. This episode delivered, whereas the previous two, it felt like they were padding out the plotting of this series. They were lengthening it, stretching it much further than it needed to be. Like, they should have already reached their end game by now, as far as I'm concerned. And where I had a lot of issues with those previous two episodes, this one finally delivered on the things I was really left strongly, most desirably wanting, with progression, with certain elements of closure and such like that. You know, I wanted to see these characters actually growing and evolving like they had been for a time. And then until the previous, two episodes where they were stunted and stagnant, we finally have that again in this episode. This episode was filled with progression, forward progression, satisfying progression. And then they kind of like, the other leg drops toward the end of the episode. And it's like, fuck. Pardon my French. But we begin this episode with Satsui's turning down of Aido. And he actually does this in a really clever, compassionate way. I mean, he's very compassionate in his, engaging her about his feelings and his thoughts on the matter, his love and infatuation with Iroha, and how that was mutual, and how that has shaped him and allowed him to grow and evolve, become less of a wallflower. He's actually beginning to bloom, and he's finally cognizant of this. And it was interesting how he has the little dream sequence with his little anime character, favorite character, who's like, you have no imagination. You gotta actually think. Something I said in the comments in response to a couple of people on the previous episode discussion video was that he needs to kind of take into consideration the things that he's doing more recently, as far as, that coincides with Iroha's being upset with him. And it takes the little anime character to actually just spill it out to him. What did you do recently? You talked to the new girl with the glasses, and that coincided with Iroha's being very standoffish and upset. So could they be commingling ideas? I don't know. Let's see. Shrug, shrug. But he figures it out. He figures out that, that's where I took the misstep. And he manages to, compassionately reveal his feelings to Aido, whilst also making sure that Iroha will be there, will be within earshot. He knows she's there. He's confessing in two ways, his turning down of Aido, rejecting her as compassionately as he can and respectably as he can, whilst also hoping to assuage any of Iroha's frustrations and confusion and everything like that. And he kills two birds with one stone, effectively. And it was like giving me goosebumps. I was like, finally, this is what I wanted. Like, about damn time. And it was so heartwarming and satisfying, the way they're sitting, together in the sort of woods outside the grounds of their school after this scene has unfolded, and they're all sort of left comforting each other at first. But then it's just Iroha and Satsui up against the tree, and she wants to hear him say he loves her again, and it's adorable. It was so adorable and sweet, and they kiss, and I was like, ooh. I was like, finally, it brought it back to the aspects I loved from the get-go, from the beginning, from episode 1, with the relationship dynamic going on between them. I love the fact that he's leaving school, and there is Ito. The way Ito has comforted Aido as well. She's lamenting the fact that he always seems to be the one who encounters her, blubbering her eyes out and everything, being an emotional wreck. And he's so smitten by her, he's not gonna seemingly confess to that fact, because he feels like, well, there's no interest on her part, so it's already torturous enough. I'm not going to be, bold-facedly rejected and take that risk, but it's enough that he has grown and evolved to start to appreciate the social ability, sort of being interconnected with this group of friends and things. Just, something more than just his friendship with Satsui. But I love the strengthening of the bond between them, their friendship. They're going to have a sleepover, and so he's kind of hoping to talk it out a little bit, but of course he spends most of the night playing video games with his little brother and everything. But the convictions of Ito's wanting to, bury the hatchet with Tsutsui, it was sweet again. It was adorable again. It was like, ooh, heartwarming, again. And I absolutely loved it. And then, as I say, there's this other leg that dropped, which goes back to some of the earliest speculations revolving around Iroha's only being here, air quotes, for 6 months. We now know that all of this, up to this point in the show, has been 3 months worth of that 6 months. So there's 3 months to go. And when the focus puts itself more so on Iroha in the episode, she's talking about that, seed that was planted, something that came to her awareness, and they coincide this, narration, this over-narration, with a sequence of her being in a doctor's office or the hospital or something. And immediately I go back to what we have most of us who've talked back and forth on the, discussion videos that I've done covering this series, most of us have felt, is she dying? Is she sick and she's dying? She's terminally ill. She only has so long. She's got cancer. Whatever it is. Whatever it's going to, take her away from Tsutsui and everyone at the end of this 6 months. Is that what it is? Is she, is her fate sealed? Is she going to die? And I was just like, fuck! Again, pardon my French, because we did all predict this. We did all see this coming as a potential. I mean, nothing is set in stone. They could, redirect in a different direction, go some other way. But I mean, the likelihood with all of the imagery and the symbolism there and what she's talking about, how she can't escape this vine that has grown out of that seed, and even in her dreams, even when she's unconscious, the worry and the concern, and just how much she is cognizant of the satisfaction she's gained out of, revealing her feelings for Tsutsui, and how she's become more closely involved with him and much more satisfied in their interconnectivity, in that closeness. It's like she knows she has only so much time left, and she wants to grapple onto every experience, every positivity, every memory that she can have. And she doesn't want to let go, and she wants to revel in that as much as possible, feel good for as long as possible, as though she knows her time is limited. Granted, it could be that her father or mother or whatever is a career person, and their employment, a job repositioning, is something that will lead to their, taking her away from this whole scenario, whatever like that. But then why bring a hospital and a doctor and all that shit into it? And I mean, as soon as you see that iconography, those visuals in this episode, I was just like, because we said episodes ago, I think it was as early as episode 2 maybe, if not the first episode, where we first hear it from her mouth, from the horse's mouth, I'm only going to be here for 6 months. It was like, well, what does that mean? And then as soon as the hospital shows up and the doctor shows up that Tsutsui mistook her for going out on a date with and everything, it's like so plain stated and absurd that there was some level of denial on my part. I'm like, I mean, it seems like that's what they're saying. That's what they're going to do. It's such a cliched notion. I mean, are they really going to go down that path? Are they really going to have it be that brazen and bold-faced and predictable? And I almost wanted to give them more credit than maybe they are due, in thinking Is she dying? Oh, well, maybe that's just the impression we're meant to get, and it's something else. Who knows? Maybe she's pregnant from a previous relationship, and it was already 3 months into that cycle, and at the end of the 6 months, she'll have the child. Who knows? I was grasping at anything, any other alternative, because it's just a slap upside the head how cliched and how predictable this was from the outset. And it's kind of disappointing along those lines. Like, now that this episode was actually utmost uber satisfying to me. Finally, it rounded everything back to what got me into it in the first place, with the relationship dynamic going on between them. But then, as it steers back on course, it also steers back on course to that finality, to that much debated, highly speculated, and probably all bets are off end game, as to where this is going. And it's just, it's like frustrating. For those types of people, I've often heard a reference to people who would like read the last page of a novel, a book, just to have an idea of where it's going to go before they ever read the story. And that seems unconscionable to me. It seems absolutely outlandish to me to ever do that as someone who likes and enjoys reading. I would never think to jump ahead and try to read the last chapter, the last page, or whatever. But there is something to, like, the spoiler aspect of that. There is something to, it seems like that is now the directive of this story, that she's gonna die, and there's so much of that realization, if in fact it does prove to be true, where the air is being drained out from behind the sails. The balloon is withering away. What made the connectivity to the characters and their relationship and their interpersonal interconnectivity, what makes that resounding and attractive to me as a viewer. If that's where we're going with it, if it's just going to be that cliche smack upside the head, it's almost, what is the point? It begs that question. What is the point of following this? Of course I'm going to, because I'm this far into it, and I want to see it to its culmination, even if it happens to be just the worst, most cliched, overdone trope in anime or fiction, really. Unrequited love, or dissatisfied love that is broken apart by death, Romeo and Juliet, whatever you want to call it, or make comparisons between it and other things with. And so it's frustrating to think that's where they're angling with this. That's all this amounts to, And it doesn't fully undermine the evolution of like Setsui and things like that, things about his evolving and character growth that make it satisfying. It doesn't undo all of that. But based on his characterization thus far, I can only really see him backpedaling to a point in the wake of such a disastrous outcome. I'd like to hope that he would have grown and evolved beyond it. By the end of this episode, he's finally ready. He's finally happy to, air quotes, be with her again. And this involves being okay with bringing her back to his bedroom, So take that for what you will, euphemistic or plain stated or otherwise, what the directive is between them there, why they'd be going back to that particular space of all things. And I like that the mother was a little bit less of a unsupportive psycho bitch in this episode as well. Happy that Ito was over, and potentially going to be happy that Iroha will come over as well, and that they hadn't broken up, and all these things. And I got to give props to Ishino as well for setting those two freshman girls straight when they're poking fun at Ito and Aido, sitting out on the bench while she's blubbering, and his consoling her and everything. because she makes a great point. What fantastic love and relationship do you have that gives you the right to point the finger at them and be like, ha ha, you know. So Ishino was good again in this episode, less regressive and annoying as she has been. And even Mitsuya, to a point, he still flatly turns her down dating her or anything like that. But so yeah, this episode was utmost satisfying, but it's utmost frustrating as well, because it seems like we're back on course to that inevitability of her potentially dying, and WTF, what is the fucking point? But I'm still gonna sit through it and see, and we'll just have to gauge it when we finally get to the conclusion. We'll have to see how well or not they deliver on that before we can really gauge it and say whether or not it was worth it. Missteps and perfection all considered in the end, that this series has had within it, building up to that. So yeah, until the next one, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later.